The Minnesota Vikings were humiliated in Tampa Bay against the Buccaneers. And honestly, in a game, how I did not expect how this was going to play out. I mean, nothing how this game really went is exactly how I thought it was going to go. I said the two factors for this game was going to be Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings defense. Can the defense capitalize on Tom Brady's mistakes? They did not. And yet that was not why we lost. Kirk Cousins played great. And again, that is not why we lost. The factors were Dan Bailey, our kicker. That's not at all what I thought. The injuries, okay, this is something I kind of did expect. I mean, of course, Eric Kendricks was questionable going into this game, and he did not play. That was a huge loss and a massive injury for our team. But not only that, but of course, our right tackle, Brian O'Neill, was not playing. Our best offensive lineman, our Garrett Bradbury, got banged up. We also had Rashad Hill out there. It was just all... It was a bunch of injuries on our offensive line. Drew Samia was out there playing again, and again, you do not want to see Drew Samia out there. I still don't know why the Minnesota Vikings would have cut Pat Elflein. It doesn't make sense at this point because you saw how bad Drew Samia was, and you still decided to cut Pat Elflein. At the same time, of course, Drew Samia out there, Rashad Hill out there, it ended up 6 sacks on Kirk Cousins. 6 sacks on the day. That is another reason why the Vikings lost. Injuries, and then, of course, it was also the refs. I mean, in the first half, the refs were so bad, and everything they did was against the Minnesota Vikings. And we're going to talk about these. These are 3 factors. I did not think that was going to affect the Minnesota Vikings game this much. And first, we are going to highlight the bad, because this is why the Minnesota Vikings lost. The Vikings lost this game more than they would have than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won, because the Buccaneers did not play great. I mean, of course, their defense has been good the entire season, but they still allowed over 100 rushing yards to Dalvin Cook. Now, is that bad? I mean, it is Dalvin Cook, a top 3 running back in the league, arguably the best running back in the league, and he's a top 3 running back in the league, and still giving him this many rushing yards is not bad. You held him to under 5 yards a carry. Anyways, still, at the same time, Dan Bailey missing 4 kicks is not what we expected. Now, Dan Bailey is coming off of a terrible 2-game stretch, and we're going to get into more of Dan Bailey. We're going to have an entire segment of this episode talking about Dan Bailey, and we're not going to get into all that right now because he costed us 9 points, and this is not the only reason why the Vikings lost, even though it might be the biggest reason. On the first quarter, though, we're going to talk about these refs. In the first quarter, they missed an easy personal foul that was called on Chad Beebe, a huge late hit, helmet to helmet. And honestly, if you don't call that and you call the hit against Harrison Smith, they called a helmet to helmet on Harrison Smith. Now, I don't hate them calling helmet to helmet on Harrison Smith a personal foul right there, because of course it was there, but it was not as clear as the hit on Chad Beebe in the first quarter. Now, this was not the biggest hit. I mean, this was not the biggest call. They had 2 massive calls against the Vikings team that really costed us this game. Jeff Gladney this was one that wasn't talked very much, but Jeff Gladney, they called pass interference on him on a clear interception. This was a clear interception. They called pass interference. There was some contact against Mike Evans. And when you look at the replay, you can see there is something there, but still it's not big enough for them to call. And then he also got an interception, which would have turned into a pick 6. This would have been Jeff Gladney's first interception and of course his first touchdown of his career. Yet they just went on with it, and then it gave him an easy touchdown. Ronald Jones ran in for a 1-yard rushing touchdown. But the worst call of the game, a Hail Mary at the end of the second half, or at the end of the first half, end of the second quarter. Tom Brady threw for, who was it? Gronk? Yeah, he threw to Gronk, and it was a great pass to Gronkowski. They called pass interference. Not only was there no call there to be made, there was no pass interference, but when is there not pass interference? When is there not contact on Hail Marys? That's the whole thing about a Hail Mary. They run down the field and there's always contact between the guys because the ball is up in the air and there's just contact. They're all having contact with each other, trying to get in the best position to catch the ball. That's right there. That's what a Hail Mary is. There's a bunch of guys in a group and you just throw it and have a prayer and hope that it lands in one of your receiver's hands. There's always contact. In this case, there was no contact in the Hail Mary, and yet they called it. And this ended to an easy field goal for the, Suck Up or whatever his name is, Sakoop or something. And this gave him an easy field goal. And while the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were going into halftime, what were they up 14? No, it was like they were up 17 to something. It was something like that going into the half, and it should have been 14 to 13. And Vikings should have had 13 points and down by 1 point going into the half. Instead, the refs were just this bad and costed us the entire first half. The first half was this was so bad by the referees this first half, and all against the Minnesota Vikings, and this was terrible. This was awful. I mean, of course, even the announcers agreed that this was an awful call on Hail Mary because that's something you just don't call. because there's always contact on Hail Mary. In this case, there was no contact. So there is no reason to throw a flag here. And then against Jeff Gladney, again, there was no reason to throw it there. On Harrison Smith, again, that's okay for them to throw a pass, helmet to helmet, a personal foul on Harrison Smith because it was there. But then you don't call it on Chad Beebe when that was a bigger hit. Anyways, I just think this was terrible by the refs. This was an awful game for the referees this game. And but honestly, I can sit here blaming the refs all day. At the end of the day, that is not the biggest reason why the Vikings lost this game, because Dan Bailey and those injuries suffered this entire game. How do you miss over 4? Anyways, whatever. We're not going to get talking into much of Dan Bailey because we have a lot to highlight. Again, Kirk Cousins, he did not play awful this game. I know the stats may disagree with me, but he did not play awful this game. I mean, he threw the ball away so many times, and that's why his completion percentage was so low. He was pressured on every down. And this is something I said. I said, as long as they're stopping Dalvin Cook, which they couldn't. I mean, Dalvin Cook was playing great. As long as they're stopping Dalvin Cook, Kirk is not going to be safe under center. Where were the bootlegs? Now, I know this is more on Gary Kubiak than it is on Kirk Cousins, but where were the bootleg play action passes? When has that not worked? And they didn't do it all game. You're going against a team that is going to be pressuring you on every down. Kirk Cousins was sacked 6 times. Not only that, but you now have a banged up offensive line. Half of your offensive line are backup players. And you're not doing play action passes or bootleg play action passes or whatever. You're not moving him outside of the pocket is what I'm trying to say. Now, Kirk, he made a lot of plays. He ran for a lot of first downs. Kirk had 5 rushing attempts for, I think, 40 yards. Great. Kudos to Kirk Cousins. None to Gary Kubiak. His play calling was awful. Not only that, he called a play to Tajay Sharp. It was in the 4th quarter. Vikings needed a scoring drive. They needed to get a touchdown this drive to keep them in the game, and they just went for the end zone on 3rd and 13. Now, I don't hate the idea for going to the end zone on 3rd and 13. I think it's totally fine because you are that desperate for a touchdown. You need to go for a touchdown. The idea that I hate is that they went for Tajay Sharp. He has not caught 1 reception. No, I think he has caught 1 reception this entire season. Has he? Has Tajay Sharp even gotten a reception this whole season? And you go for him on like the most needed play of the game. You would need this touchdown to win the game, to keep yourself in the game. You would need this touchdown, and you go to Tajay Sharp. You have Jefferson, you have Thielen, you have Dalvin Cook, and you go to Tajay Sharp on 3rd and 13. Now, this leaves us to 4th and 13, where I think they go and get like 8 yards or something on this play. Still, what is Gary Kubiak doing? I expected a lot more from Gary Kubiak going into this season as our offensive coordinator because he has been in the NFL a long time. This man is like 63 years old and has been in the NFL a long time. He has a Super Bowl under his belt already. I expected a lot from Gary Kubiak, and this was an awful game from him. And honestly, maybe the biggest factor why we lost this game. More than Dan Bailey missing all of his kicks. Because at the end of the day, okay, there's also Mike Zimmer. He has some ideas if they should kick or not. There is Mike Zimmer out there. But a lot of it has to do with Gary Kubiak and his play calling. Terrible. Why would you go to Tajay Sharp on 3rd and 13? Where's the bootlegs? I don't understand. It's simple math. You do what works. You don't do what doesn't work. It's that simple. When has going to Tajay Sharp worked the entire season? When has play action bootleg passes not worked the entire season? Just do what works. And then here he's doing a bunch of other stuff. I don't understand that at all. And then Kirk, he's getting pressured on every down. Just move him outside the pocket. This is not very hard. This is not hard to understand. This is a big reason why the Vikings lost this game. And a lot of it is Dan Bailey. I will say Dan Bailey may be the biggest factor, but Gary Kubiak, he's up there. They're both up there. They're trying to see who can lose us the game better, basically. Anyways, there was a lot of good that came out of this game. I mean, of course, the Minnesota Vikings played awful and they got humiliated against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but there was a lot of good that actually came out of this game. First of all, Kirk Cousins, he can run. And I've been saying this a long time. Kirk Cousins can run. That's one thing people don't understand. And I've said this a lot, but he can run. He just doesn't. And so far, these last few games, I am so happy what I see from Kirk Cousins, him running for first downs. He had 5 rushing attempts for 41 yards. That may be the best of his career. He has not rushed for a touchdown yet this season. But at the same time, most of the plays that he does run aren't even designed for him to run. He just sees an open gap and he does run, which I'm very proud of that because This is something I've been saying. Kirk does not see that open gap and run for it. He does not run for very many first downs up until these last few games. I am happy what I see from Kirk Cousins. And then outside of that, he did get 225 passing yards, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion, 64.9 completion percentage. Now, that's a very low completion percentage. Anything under 70 is not very good. But at the same time, if you watched yesterday's game, a lot of the times he had to throw the ball away. He had to get rid of that ball because he was pressured. He was pressured on just about every down because of those injuries on the offensive line and because they are a great pass rushing team in the NFL. And then also on top of that, a 90.5 QBR. Great job. Kirk had a pretty good game. Of course, it's not impressive, but he had a pretty good game. He made plays with his legs, he made plays with his arms, and at the end of the day, a lot of the plays that he did made were the right plays to be made. At the same time, though, these tight ends are elite. This is another thing that I've been saying. We don't need Kyle Rudolph. We do not need Kyle Rudolph. He is a great tight end. Kyle Rudolph is an amazing blocking tight end and may not be as good as he used to be, but he is still a clear number one tight end. But we should have traded Kyle Rudolph before the deadline. I made an episode where I was talking about this. I'm saying we need to trade Kyle Rudolph because Irv Smith is great. Tyler Conklin is great. One thing I didn't know about Tyler Conklin was that he could catch like this. I knew he was a great blocking tight end. I did not know he was going to catch like this. Yesterday, we saw how great our tight ends are outside of Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph, we've already known, was a great tight end, and they haven't used him very much in the red zone so far this season, but he has had a lot of good blocks that led to Dalvin Cook runs, and is still a pretty good tight end. Now, after the season, you got to trade Kyle Rudolph. And I know why they haven't traded Kyle Rudolph yet. It's because he loves playing for this team. Of course, this is where he's been for about 10 years now. He has raised a family here. He has kids. He's raised a family here in Minnesota, and he would like to stay here. I'm sure he would. But at the end of the day, what matters more, winning or caring about Kyle Rudolph's feelings, basically? Just trade him. Just trade him. I know he has a foundation here. I know he has he raises money for some children's Minnesota, something like that at the U of M. At the end of the day, what matters more for the Vikings team? Trading Kyle Rudolph. Just trade him. You can't get a whole lot out of Kyle Rudolph at this point. I think he is like 32, 34, somewhere around that age. You can't get a whole lot, but if you can get a 4th round draft pick and turn that into a half decent defensive tackle, I messed that up. I messed that word up a little bit. But if you can get a 4th round draft pick, turn it into a defensive tackle who knows how to stop the run, who knows how to rush, something like that, it's worth it. It's completely worth it. Trade Kyle Rudolph. We don't need him. We don't need him. I know he's a great tight end, but our tight ends outside of him are great at the same time. Anyways, Irv Smith, 4 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown. I've been saying this is Irv Smith's breakout year. Of course, it has not been so far because he has suffered with some injuries, and they haven't used him very much. Surprisingly, they have not used Irv Smith Jr. very much. At the same time, 4 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown. He is an X factor for our team right there. Tyler Conklin, 5 receptions for 40 yards. Here's a stat for you. Both Irv Smith and Tyler Conklin yesterday got more yards than Thielen and Jefferson. Both of our tight ends got more yards than Thielen and Jefferson. And that's not because Thielen and Jefferson had a great game. That's because they were mostly used for decoys. The Vikings offense did not look bad yesterday. They did not look bad at all yesterday. It was mostly because they were using Thielen and Jefferson as decoys, and they were using a lot of our X factors. Outside of that, CJ Ham, another massive X factor. If you watched that, CJ Ham was lined up as a wide receiver multiple downs on the game. And he's a better wide receiver than he is a running back. Now, he's the best fullback in the league, of course, because he's an amazing blocker and is honestly he's the secret ingredient why Dalvin Cook has been as great as he was this year and as great as he was last year, was because CJ Ham and those big, massive blocks on the linebackers, on the defensive tackles, anything like that. CJ Ham is great. He is a great wide receiver. He got 3 receptions yesterday for 22 yards and best fullback in the league, but he's a better wide receiver than he is a running back. He can't run with the ball very much. They did give him a carry yesterday, and he didn't get a yard. I do like the idea of using him in the running game, just because he's lined up as a fullback. You can just give him a carry, try to use him. Not a great running back. Not a great running back right there. He hasn't rushed very well this season so far and didn't get a single yard yesterday. He got 1 carry, though. Anyways, Dalvin Cook, he is the first running back this season to rush for over 100 yards against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Like I said for the preview, I've said this is the best run-stopping defense in the NFL. We cannot feed Dalvin Cook this game. And they didn't. They only gave Dalvin Cook 22 carries, in which he rushed for over 100 yards. He rushed for 102 rushing yards. That averaged at 4.6 yards a carry. I said I thought that they were going to hold him to under 4 yards a carry. Very impressive by Dalvin Cook. I know he's a great running back, and of course, still 4.6 yards a carry is under his average, but it's against the best run-stopping defense in the NFL. That is great. And then he also had 2 receptions for 8 yards and a rushing touchdown. He leads the NFL with 14 rushing touchdowns right now, is tied with Derrick Henry. They are about neck and neck right now on who's the best running back in the league, Derrick Henry or Dalvin Cook. You can throw Christian McCaffrey in there. I mean, he's been injured, but you could throw him in the conversation too. And those are the 3 running backs who are top 3, and you can't argue anybody else inside that. Anyone who tries to argue Saquon or Zeke at this point, it just doesn't make sense. Anyways, so that wraps up this game. We have a lot of X factors on our Vikings offense. A lot. We look at Jefferson, we look at Thielen, we look at Cook. These are our guys right here. Outside of that, to have CJ Ham, Tyler Conklin, Chad Beebe, and Irv Smith all stepping in and being pieces that you can use, get those first downs, get those 8-yard receptions that turn into first downs, get those short passes. This is huge. This is big. I mean, this Vikings team looks good. This Vikings offense looks really good. And honestly, with Eric Kendrick yesterday, honestly, even if Dan Bailey costed us 10 points, if the refs if they weren't as bad as they were in the first half, if they were actually doing decent calls, and then at the same time, if we had an entire healthy team, of course, that includes Eric Kendricks being healthy, our offensive line, if our team was healthy, we would have won the game. I do think so. Because did the Buccaneers look that good? They did not look that good. That defense looked really good. I mean, they pressured Kirk a lot, but that offense did not look as good as I thought that they were going to look. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and then they also have Scotty Miller, they have Antonio Brown, they have Rob Gronkowski. They have so many playmakers on offense where I thought they were going to be putting up over 30, somewhere around 40 points against our defense. They made a lot of mistakes. Problem is, we didn't capitalize on those mistakes that Tom Brady did make. He overthrown a lot of his guys. He made bad passes at the same time. Still, it's a tough loss. We're still in the playoff picture. No, we're not in the playoff picture. We are still in the hunt, and now we are going against the Chicago Bears at home, who we should beat. We should beat the Chicago Bears. Of course, Mitchell Trubisky is coming off of his best game possibly of the season, of course, and then possibly of his career. But again, we play the Chicago Bears this Sunday, 12 o'clock. I'm going to be previewing this matchup on Thursday. This is going to be a big matchup because actually both of these teams are still in the hunt. Chicago Bears are going to need to rely on Arizona to lose like 3 out of the next 4 of their games or something like that. But still, both teams are still in the hunt, and this is a huge game for the Vikings because we need to win this. We can't afford to lose another game, finishing the season 8-8. Still, Vikings can make the playoffs at 8-8. Not very likely. We're going to be previewing this matchup. I hope you all do enjoy that.